Today's a big day. We've got all our parts cut and ready to assemble, and we just have to look at what kind of fasteners we are going to use and how we're going to put it all together. So things are really going to start taking shape now. But what we need to do is let's go back to our prototype, the maquette, and just see what we'll use to attach it. Let's just look at the way we've got everything attached here. On the front and back, we've got a bolt, and that's bolted right through with a nut on that side. You can see that we also have a screw that is going into the wood. We can't have two at the front because we've got this part cut away, but at the back we'll have two screws coming in this way, and that'll be the same on either side. So that is what holds the whole frame together. Now our other thing is the hinge, because our top is hinged onto the bed rail. So you can see that these hinges have been cut. One set is attached to the bed rail all the way along there, and the other side here is attached to our top. So that allows the back to fold up, the front to fold up, while everything is attached to the rail. What we want to do is make sure that our screws are towards the outside of our 1x3. And we'll also cut it close to a joint. So if we look there, that's good. And all the way down to the other end, that's good there. So the first thing we'll do is just cut this off. And ideally, we want this slightly inside, just so the metal's not sticking past or right at the edge. So cut it a little bit short. Once we've got it cut, you can see that it's maybe 1/8 of an inch short. 26.5 will be our center. It depends on the spacing of your piano hinge, but just mark it in the center. And what we're going to do is do this in sets of 2. So we'll go along here and we'll mark where we'll cut. So there. So this section right here will be up. So I'm going to put a little dot on it. And we'll go another 2, and we're always doing it right at the joint. Okay, that one is going to be down. So carry on like this. That one is going to be up on the surface. And we have 1, 2, 3 here. If we go from the other side, we'll do the same thing. So we've got 2, divide it there, divide it there. And as we come along here, we notice that in the center, we've actually got 1, 2, 3 holes, but that's no problem, as long as these are even. So that tells us exactly where we have to cut. And we'll take our grinder and we'll cut all those hinges open. So what we end up with is a piece of hinge with a lot of loose hinges on one side. And what we need to do is just go back in and clean up the edges there so that they're not sharp. Once you've taken the burr off, then we can slip this in behind the top and alternate them. One down, one up, one down, one up. These ones will hold this top place. The other ones will hold the hinge onto the angle iron. Looking back on our prototype to see how those hinges are held on, we bolted them through. And if we look on the back side, what what we've done is drill a hole and recess the bolt into the back. That's just so this is going to be completely smooth and won't catch on anything. The inside doesn't really matter because there's nothing to catch there. Keep it out of the way. So what we have to do is mark all of the holes for those hinges to drill them through. If you do have vice grips, this would be a good time to use them just to clamp one end on there. And as you can see, we've got to make sure we keep them, all the ones that are going to be on the top, keep them up. And we'll just make sure that our hinge is flat. And we'll take our marker and just mark all the holes. We can mark the first one, but we don't need to mark the second one. On our side rails, we're going to measure 1.25 inches over and 3/4 of an inch up. So that's 1.25 over and 3/4 of an inch this way. That's where our bolt will be. 1.25 inches over, which is in the middle, 3/4 of an inch up. And let's do that on both sides. Now in each of those spots, we'll try to drill a hole as straight as we can. Now we'll reassemble everything, making sure that all of our clearances are right at all the corners and using our main sheet to square everything up. Just make sure everything looks nice and tight. So now we'll just carefully drill our pilot hole long enough that we make a mark. So now when we take it out, we should have a good mark there to go by. And there's our mark right there. Now another thing that we need to do, we need to drill a hole at the front here for a screw, which will be right here. It's going to be 3/4 of an inch over and 3/8 of an inch down. So we'll just measure that and make a mark. Now I'm just going to take a punch and go along and mark the center of each of the marks. So what we're going to end up with is a small mark like that, and that should be exactly where the hinge will be bolted on. The main thing when you're drilling metal is to go slow. Don't be in a hurry. Just let the bit do its work. It's always good to have a good bit, even a cobalt bit, if you're drilling through stainless. But we'll just mark all our holes here. One last measurement we need to make is we need to go back and drill a hole 1.5 inches this way and at the same distance in. And we'll just punch that. That hole is for the extra screw in the back of our side support. I ended up drilling pilot holes, 1/8 pilot holes in all of the holes, and now we'll just determine how big the holes have to be. I'm going to be using a number 8 screws and machine screws. These are Robertson. They're a Canadian version, but you can find something in Phillips. And the length, I'm just using 3/8 of an inch. It's probably the shortest you'll be able to find. And we might have to trim a little bit off them, but that's all we need to hold that all together. To countersink these, I'm just going to use a drill bit, and I'm going to do them by eye. There we go. Nice and flush, so it won't be sticking out. Now we can just carry on and do all the rest. Once we have them all countersunk, then we just need to drill out our center hole with a drill bit that's big enough for our screw, machine screw, to go straight through. Let's now look at how we're going to attach the corners. If you remember, we drilled a pilot hole through. There's the corresponding hole on the bed frame, and that's the front. And what we're going to use is 5/16 inch bolts. And we need them to be 1 3/4 of an inch long, so they don't protrude too far. But if you can't find that, we can always cut them off. I have a supply here of these bolts, which are hex head flat, which I really like to use. And if anybody is nearby, Ottawa, Canada, come by and pick some up, because I got a ton of them. But otherwise, what you might find is carriage bolt. And a carriage bolt has kind of a square shoulder on it. What we're looking for is something that'll sit flush, but the square corner locks it into the hole. You might find it like that, or longer like that. 2 inches probably common. I'm not sure about 1 3/4 inches. And we're going to need some washers and some 5/16 inch nuts. Very easy to find. Now I just showed the sample of how this works. So for the carriage bolt, I've drilled a 5/16 inch hole, and I put the bolt in the hole and then hit it with a hammer. Make sure that you've got this hanging over something so that it makes a square hole. And that locks the bolt into place. For the recessed ones, if you get those, I need to drill a hole. Now, more than likely, you wouldn't have a 5/8 drill bit. So what I'm using is a spade bit. So this is our spade bit. And what we want to do is make sure that we don't drill this hole out first, because we want the spade bit to follow the center of that. So all we'll do is just once we drill the hole out, it will sit nice and flush. Let's go ahead and drill all our 5/16 inch holes. When you're drilling your 5/8 holes, we want them a little bigger just to give us a little bit of play. So drill the hole and then just ream it a little bit out so that it's a little bit bigger, so that our bolt has a little bit of play in there. We've got everything drilled, so I think it's time to assemble. Well, this is the exciting part, putting it all together. As you can see, I put some blocks underneath here. These ones are just holding the frame up. I put these larger blocks in the center so that when we put our panel in, we can use it to square up our frame. So we can go ahead and put our bolts in the corner, and they're 5/16, so a washer and a nut on it. If you have longer bolts, you might need it to be higher. But don't tighten them down, just put the nut on loosely, and we want to be able to move the frame a little bit. So let's get that all done so it's all the bolts are in. If for any reason your bolt doesn't line up, just take your drill bit and ream your hole a little bit, but don't do it too much. There's some give in this, so we'll pull it all together. Let's see how our panel fits. Just remember, you've marked it at the front, so that fits pretty well. We want a little tiny bit of a space. Mine looks a little tight at the back, so just see how much we're hanging over here. And I think I might just ream this hole here a little bit to let it slide just a touch over, just to give me a bit more space. So let's do that. So it may mean that I didn't get this hole absolutely straight, so I want it to just be able to move a little bit. So I'll just and that might be enough. Before we tighten everything up, we need to insert our hinge. The hinge goes behind here, and we just want to make sure that we've got it, all our up pieces going up and the down pieces down. Now that we have the hinge in place, we can tighten down our corners. And just make sure that everything has stayed square. That's all looking great. So we can go ahead and we'll attach our hinge in place. So we'll have to take our panel out to do that. Now hopefully, when you look at this, all of your holes line up for bolting the hinge through. And we're looking good here. Just go along, we're not going to tighten these down, we're just going to get them all in place. But every hole gets a bolt and nut. Once we have all the machine screws and nuts in place, they don't need to be tightened down yet. Just make sure that your hinge for the back is working well, and it should go flat down. What we have to deal with is we have two screws that secure the end of the corners. One of them lines up with the hole in the hinge. This one doesn't, so we're going to have to drill that hole out. And we'll do that at both ends. Now the stainless is hard, so just be patient. It's going to be hard to drill through, but take your time and make sure you don't go too far into the wood, because we want our screw to bind there. So just through the hinge material. Once we have those holes drilled, and they aren't the easiest holes to drill through the stainless, so don't get discouraged. A good drill bit will help. Let's put our panel back in. We just want to make sure everything stays square for us. With our panel in there and our spacing even on each side so it's square, we're ready to tighten down the corners. And once we have the corners tightened down, we'll put the screws in to pull everything in. If everything's good, you should see that your wood sticks out a little bit here, and the metal, both the angle and the hinge, are inside. And when you tighten it down, this should be absolutely flush. Because this is end grain, I don't want to split it, so I'm going to drill a little pilot hole for the screw. So I'm going to just use 1.5" screws, and we'll put 2 in each side. Just snug them in. You don't need to over tighten, and they're only in wood, so you can strip them. Now if you find that you have a little gap here, like I do when I go to tighten the screw down, just loosen the nut off a bit, and then tighten that down, and that'll pull that right in. And now tighten your nut back up. So that's pulled in there very nicely. Well, that's it. Platform base is done. The frame. This is the crucial part. Everything else is going to fall into place after this. But if you've made it this far, congratulations. What we need to do now is see if it actually fits into the element, which is kind of crucial, but we'll work on the bracket for the seat rails, and hopefully it works. I'm not sure, but come back again and you'll find out. Thanks for coming by, and as always, take care. Bye for now.